older women love my dad. This is partly because he's a handsome older man. It's partly because of a character he played on a soap opera in the 80s. But I've come to understand that much more of it is about the quality of his character. And I think he has a vague notion that he's so adored, but I don't think it's complete. And I think if he knew how many people come up to me and tell me about what a great man he is, that he'd be surprised. Most men aren't like your father. No man is like your father. It's a blessing and a curse. You can't expect men to be like him. They're not. And you're going to be disappointed. You're so lucky. That's what a lot of these older women shared with me when I had my heart broken into a million pieces by a guy I thought was the world's best guy. Being the oversharer that I am, clearly, in the midst of my pain, I turned to my family for help, and then to the other people that raised me. And something that I kept hearing over and over again, even from people that didn't really know me that well, your father is a really exceptional man, and most men aren't going to be like your father. The breakup, it was hitting me dozens of times a day. Constantly running into friends and acquaintances and hearing how Scott, at work on Sunset Boulevard, where I was obligated to ask each client's name, it turns out that about 40% of American men are also named Scott. And after 6 weeks of this, he could see I needed to get away. And that's how, at the lowest point I've ever been in my entire life, he scooped me up and he carried me to Standing Rock. Without getting too into the logistics of the thing, we were there before the snow fell and before the violence escalated and before the water cannons and below freezing temperatures in the middle of the night. It felt really good to get away, to meet these people and to hear their stories, and to help somewhere that I felt helpless. But let's not forget, I had also been dumped in August by a guy who had moved across the street from me in July. And he's still there, surprisingly to me. And I was not super together, but my dad and I were together the whole time. It could not have been easy for him to see me like that. There were a lot of tears in the hotel, in the car, over cheesy scrambled eggs at the casino. Mostly tears that were kind of calm and quiet, and I could sit through them and talk through them and eat my eggs through them. But sometimes the type of tears that kind of render you pretty useless for anything except the crying. And through it all, he never once looked embarrassed or frustrated. And instead, he looked me in the eye and he held my gaze. When you're trying to forget about somebody, it can be really helpful to talk to people who are in the middle of fighting a multi-generational struggle, people who are kind and brave. And the thing that set apart my time at Standing Rock from anything else I've ever experienced was the sheer number of strangers that I talked to. It was in the triple digits, and I have never talked to so many strangers in my little millennial life that I lead. And a lot of this was because of my dad. He's, as an actor, played some of the only modern representations of Native Americans in the media, parts that meant so much to him and clearly meant a lot to a lot of the people that we talked to, plus the soaps. And every time he was asked for a picture, which seemed like about every 5 minutes, he would smile eagerly and he would whip out his enormous iPhone 6 Plus and he would say, "Can I get one of us with my phone too?" But as anybody that's ever really tried to forget about something is well aware, the universe has its ways of helping you out to remember. On the day before we left to go back to California, I absentmindedly reached into my coat pocket on the upper left-hand side, and I found a little pile of sea glass collected on my last visit to his parents' house in Seattle. On our way to the airport, we stopped at camp one last time, and I walked to the perimeter and crouched by the chain link fence, and I took a piece of sea glass out of my pocket, held it to my lips, and dropped it into the wild grass. My dad and I were walking to our rental car, and we heard a man summoning us, calling out to us. He handed us each a small pouch of tobacco. "For safety on your travels," he said. And I held that tobacco to my nose and I breathed deep, and my dad and I flew home. And I remember he even said to me, "You're such an easy person to travel with, such an easy person to be around." We got home and I saw him differently. It's difficult to explain. I would look at him and I would see him walking through camp, helping to build a teepee, sharing his granola with anyone and everyone, smiling in those photos, asking people for their stories, introducing me to everyone that introduced themselves to him, looking back at me and my tears across the casino breakfast table. This man that was more than a man. And when people would ask us back home, what was it like? He would smile, and he would gesture to me, and he would say, "I'll never forget it." Can you imagine getting to be there with her?